The cold vacuum of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Among the distant stars, a sleek alien ship moved silently through the darkness. The vessel belonged to the Zephyrians, a race that had traveled between stars for thousands of years. Their ship, called the Stellar Wind, was beautiful to look at. Its surface was made of a crystal-like material that caught and reflected the light from nearby stars. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his ship. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. His large eyes scanned the screens around him as his crew worked at their stations. The Zephyrians had been exploring this part of the galaxy for many months now. They were looking for new worlds and new species to study. "Commander," called out Science Officer Crixina from her position at the sensor array, "I am detecting something unusual ahead of us." Veltar moved closer to look at the readings. On the screen, he could see the outline of an object floating in space. It was much smaller than their ship, but it was clearly artificial. Someone had built it. "What do you think it is?" asked Veltar. Crixina studied the data more carefully. "It appears to be a spacecraft of some kind, but the design is unlike anything in our databases. The materials seem very primitive compared to our technology." The alien ship moved closer to the mysterious object. As they got nearer, more details became visible. The unknown vessel was dark and lifeless. No lights flickered on its surface. No energy signatures showed that anyone was alive inside. "It looks abandoned," said Navigation Officer Zethiel. "Should we investigate?" Veltar considered this carefully. The Zephyrians were peaceful explorers, but they were also cautious. Finding unknown technology in space could be dangerous. However, their mission was to study new things, and this certainly qualified as something new. "Prepare a boarding party," Veltar decided. "We will examine this vessel and try to learn where it came from." As the Stellar Wind positioned itself next to the derelict ship, the aliens got their first close look at the strange craft. It was made of metal, which seemed very basic to them. The Zephyrians had moved beyond using such crude materials long ago. Their ships were grown from living crystal that could repair itself and adapt to different conditions. The human ship they had found was called the USS Defiant. It had been missing for 3 years, but the aliens did not know this. They did not even know that humans existed. The ship had belonged to Captain Jake Morrison and his crew of 42 people. They had been on a secret mission when their ship had vanished without a trace. Back on Earth and the human colonies, people had searched for the Defiant for months. They had found only small pieces of wreckage that told them nothing about what had happened. Eventually, they had given up hope. The crew was declared dead, and their families had mourned their loss. But the ship had not been destroyed. Instead, it had been pulled into a strange area of space near a dying star. The gravitational forces there were unusual, and they had trapped the vessel in a kind of pocket dimension. It had been drifting there ever since, waiting to be found. Crixina led the boarding party onto the human ship. She brought with her 3 other Zephyrians, each carrying scanning equipment and translation devices. They entered through an airlock that had been damaged, but was still functional. The inside of the ship was dark and cold. The air was thin, but still breathable. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls as the aliens moved through the corridors. Everything looked strange to them. The humans had built their ship in a very different way than the Zephyrians would have. "The construction is so crude," whispered one of the boarding party members. "They use bolts and welding to hold things together. How primitive." But as they explored deeper into the ship, Crixina began to notice things that did not match her first impressions. The computers, though built differently than Zephyrian technology, seemed more complex than she had expected. The power systems were unfamiliar, but appeared to be quite advanced. In the ship's main laboratory, they found equipment that puzzled them. The humans had been working on projects that the aliens did not immediately understand. There were machines that seemed to bend space around them. Other devices appeared to manipulate time itself. "This is impossible," said Crixina as she studied one of the machines. "These readings suggest they were working with dimensional physics, but that should be far beyond a primitive species." The boarding party continued their exploration. They found the crew quarters, the dining hall, and the command center. In each area, they discovered more evidence that the humans were not as simple as they had first appeared. In Captain Morrison's quarters, they found personal logs and research notes. The translation devices worked slowly to convert the human language into something the Zephyrians could understand. As the words became clear, Crixina felt a growing sense of unease. The humans had not just been exploring space. They had been conducting experiments that pushed the boundaries of science itself. Their captain had been working on something called consciousness transfer and dimensional navigation. These were concepts that even the advanced Zephyrians found difficult to grasp. "We need to report this to the commander immediately," Crixina told her team. "This changes everything we thought we knew about this species." As they prepared to return to their ship, one of the team members noticed something strange. The human ship's power systems were beginning to activate on their own. Lights flickered on throughout the vessel, and computer systems started running programs that had been dormant for years. "What is happening?" asked one of the aliens. Crixina checked her scanners, but the readings made no sense. The ship was coming back to life, but there was no one aboard to turn it on. The power source was unlike anything they had seen before. It seemed to draw energy from the fabric of space itself. The aliens quickly returned to their ship to report their findings. Commander Veltar listened to their report with growing amazement. The species they had discovered was far more advanced than anyone had imagined. This was not just a primitive vessel drifting in space. It was something much more significant. "Prepare a full scientific team," Veltar ordered. "We need to study this ship and learn everything we can about the beings who built it. This discovery could change our understanding of the galaxy itself." As the stellar wind prepared for a more detailed investigation, none of the aliens realized that their presence had triggered something aboard the human ship. Deep in its computer systems, programs were running that had been waiting for exactly this moment. The crew of the Defiant had not died as everyone believed. They had found a way to continue existing, and now they were beginning to wake up. The Zephyrians had been watching Earth for many years. Their observation posts, hidden in the outer edges of the solar system, had recorded everything humans did in space. To them, the people of Earth seemed like children playing with dangerous toys. From their advanced perspective, human technology looked laughably primitive. They watched as humans struggled to build simple rockets that could barely escape their planet's gravity. They saw the crude space stations that humans had assembled piece by piece, using methods that the Zephyrians had abandoned centuries ago. "Look at how they burned chemical fuel just to reach their own moon," Crixina had said during one of their observation sessions. "We mastered gravitational manipulation when our species was still young." The Zephyrians had shared their reports with the Galactic Council, a group of advanced civilizations that governed most of the known galaxy. The Council had species from hundreds of different worlds, each with their own technologies and cultures. They had seen many primitive races before, and humans seemed to fit the usual pattern. The Council had classified humanity as Tier 7 on their development scale. This meant they were considered interesting enough to watch, but not advanced enough to make contact with. Most Tier 7 species eventually either destroyed themselves or slowly developed into something more sophisticated. The Council would check on them every few hundred years to see how they were progressing. Commander Veltar had been part of the observation team for over a decade. He had watched human society grow and change, but he had never seen anything that impressed him. Their wars seemed pointless, their technology crude, and their understanding of science limited. They still use nuclear fusion for power, he had reported to the council. Their fastest ships take months to travel between planets in their own system. They have not even begun to understand the basic principles of faster-than-light travel. But now, as Veltar looked at the readings from the human ship, he began to wonder if they had missed something important. The vessel floating in front of them was definitely human in origin, but it contained technology that should not exist. Lieutenant Amy Parker had been the chief engineer aboard the Defiant. Her personal workspace, which the aliens had now discovered, contained blueprints and calculations that made their most advanced scientists confused. She had been working on theoretical problems that the Zephyrians thought were impossible to solve. Her notes, slowly being translated by the alien computers, showed that she had been developing new ways to manipulate space and time. The equations she had written were more complex than anything in the Zephyrian databases. Her understanding of quantum mechanics seemed to surpass even their greatest minds. "This cannot be correct," said Dr. Yexton, the Stellarwind's chief scientist. "These calculations suggest she had solved the unified field theory. Our own scientists have been working on that problem for 1,000 years." The aliens found similar surprises throughout the ship. In the laboratory of Dr. Ryan Collins, the ship's quantum physicist, they discovered research that challenged everything they thought they knew about reality. His work on dimensional folding was centuries ahead of anything the Galactic Council had achieved. Dr. Collins had been working on a theory that consciousness itself could be used to navigate through higher dimensions. This was something that even the most advanced species in the galaxy considered pure fantasy. Yet his notes showed detailed mathematical proofs that the theory was not only possible but practical. "If this is real," whispered Crixina as she studied the equations, "then these humans have discovered something that could revolutionize space travel for every species in the galaxy." The more the aliens explored, the more confused they became. How could a species that still used primitive chemical rockets have scientists who understood advanced physics better than civilizations that had been traveling between stars for millennia? The answer lay in something the Zephyrians had not understood about human nature. While they had been watching human technology, they had not been paying attention to human creativity and determination. Humans had a way of thinking about problems that was completely different from other species. Where the Zephyrians and other advanced races had developed technology gradually over thousands of years, humans had a tendency to make sudden leaps forward. They would struggle with basic concepts for decades, then suddenly discover breakthrough solutions that changed everything. The crew of the Fall Defiant had been part of a secret human project that the aliens had never detected. While the public face of human space exploration looked primitive, there had been classified research programs working on advanced concepts that would have amazed the galaxy's most sophisticated civilizations. Captain Jake Morrison had been chosen to lead this mission because of his unique background. He had not just been a skilled pilot and leader, but also a brilliant scientist who understood both practical engineering and theoretical physics. His crew had been selected from among the most innovative minds that humanity had produced. Mission of the Defiant had been to test technologies that were decades ahead of anything the general public knew about. They had been working on projects that would have immediately moved humanity from Tier 7 to Tier 2 on the Galactic Council scale, if anyone had known about them. But the secrecy that had protected these projects had also made them invisible to the alien observers. The Zephyrians had been watching the wrong things. They had focused on the obvious signs of human technology while missing the real breakthroughs happening in hidden laboratories. As the alien boarding party continued their investigation, they found evidence of research programs that had been running for years. The humans had been working on consciousness transfer, dimensional navigation, and quantum manipulation. These were all considered impossible by most galactic civilizations. Got in the ship's medical bay, they found the work of Dr. Kevin Walsh, the chief medical officer. His research into human consciousness had led him to discoveries about the nature of the mind that went far beyond anything the Zephyrians had achieved. He had been working on ways to preserve human consciousness even after the death of the physical body. The aliens also found records of the ship's tactical officer, Commander Lisa Brooks. She had been developing weapon systems that used quantum effects to manipulate matter at the subatomic level. Her designs could theoretically destroy entire fleets of ships with devices no larger than a human hand. "We have made a terrible mistake," Commander Veltar said as he reviewed the reports from his boarding party. "We have been watching these humans for decades, and we completely misunderstood what they were capable of." The evidence was overwhelming. The humans had not just been developing advanced technology in secret. They had been working on concepts that were so far beyond galactic standards that most species would have considered them magic rather than science. The Zephyrians began to realize that their classification system was fundamentally flawed. They had been judging species based on their most visible technologies, not their hidden capabilities. The humans had deliberately kept their most advanced work secret, making them appear primitive when they were actually more advanced than many Tier 1 civilizations. "We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately," Veltar decided. "They need to know that our understanding of human capabilities has been completely wrong." But as the commander prepared to send his report, something unexpected happened. The communication systems aboard the Stellar Wind began to malfunction. The ship's computers started receiving signals that should not have been possible. The dead human vessel was somehow interfering with their technology. The aliens realized that their investigation had triggered something aboard the Defiant. The ship was not as dead as they had thought. Deep within its systems, programs were running that had been waiting for someone to discover them. The crew of the Defiant had found a way to continue existing, and their presence was beginning to make itself known out as alarms began to sound throughout the Stellar Wind. The aliens understood that they had stumbled upon something far more significant than just advanced technology. They had found evidence of a breakthrough that would change the nature of life itself. The humans had not just built better ships or weapons. They had found a way to transcend the limitations of physical existence. The species that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive was about to reveal that they had achieved something that no other civilization had ever accomplished. The Zephyrians and their advanced allies were about to discover that they were the primitive ones. The deeper sections of the human ship had been locked away behind security systems that the aliens had never seen before. The doors were made of a metal that seemed to change its properties when touched. The locks required not just codes, but somehow read the intentions of whoever tried to open them. Crixina had been working for hours to bypass the security systems. Her advanced tools, which could open almost any lock in the galaxy, seemed useless against human technology. Finally, she decided to try something different. Instead of fighting the security system, she simply asked it to open. To her amazement, it worked. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing corridors that had been sealed for 3 years. The air inside was still fresh, as if the ship had been maintaining itself all this time. "How is this possible?" asked one of the other aliens. "The ship appeared to be dead when we found it." Crixina had no answer. The human vessel was full of surprises that challenged everything she thought she knew about technology and physics. As they moved deeper into the secured sections, they found rooms that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. In the ship's most protected area, they discovered Captain Morrison's personal laboratory. The room was larger inside than it appeared from the outside, as if space itself had been folded to create more room. At the center of the laboratory sat a chair surrounded by complex machines that hummed with energy. The aliens found Morrison's final mission logs stored in a quantum computer that existed partially in normal space and partially in what the humans called hyperspace. The logs revealed that the Defiant had not been on a routine mission as the aliens had assumed. Personal log, Captain Jake Morrison, day 847 of the mission, the translated voice said. We have successfully completed the first phase of project Mindbridge. The consciousness transfer protocol is working better than we hoped. The crew is adapting to the new reality faster than our models predicted. The aliens listened in growing amazement as Morrison described experiments that sounded like science fiction. The humans had been working on a project to merge human consciousness with the fundamental forces of the universe. They had been trying to create a navigation system that could fold space using the power of the human mind. The traditional approach to faster-than-light travel requires massive amounts of energy, Morrison's log continued. But we have discovered that consciousness itself can manipulate space-time if properly focused. The human brain, when enhanced with our quantum interface technology, can navigate through dimensions that physical matter cannot reach. Commander Lisa Brooks had been the key to making this technology work. Her personnel file, which the aliens found in the ship's database, showed that she had been born with unusual brain patterns that made her naturally sensitive to quantum effects. The humans had built their entire project around her unique abilities. The aliens discovered that Brooks had been fitted with neural implants that allowed her to interface directly with the ship's navigation systems. Her consciousness could literally reach out into higher dimensions and guide the vessel through space in ways that defied conventional physics. This is impossible, Dr. Yexton said as he studied the technical specifications. Consciousness is just electrical activity in the brain. It cannot interact with the physical universe in the way these logs describe. But the evidence was all around them. The ship itself was proof that the humans had achieved something that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had never imagined. The Defiant had not been built to travel through normal space. It had been designed to navigate through dimensions that existed beyond the reach of traditional sensors. The aliens found more evidence in the work of Dr. Kevin Walsh, the ship's medical officer. His research had gone far beyond normal medicine. He had been studying the nature of consciousness itself, trying to understand how human awareness could exist independently of the physical brain. Walsh's notes described experiments that had terrified some of his colleagues. He had been working on ways to separate human consciousness from the body while keeping it alive and functional. His goal had been to create a form of existence that could survive the death of the physical form. We have achieved something remarkable, Walsh had written in his final report. Human consciousness can exist in quantum space without the need for a physical brain. The implications of this discovery are staggering. We may have found a way to achieve true immortality. The aliens realized that the crew of the Defiant had not died when their ship vanished. They had transcended physical existence and become something entirely new. The humans had discovered a way to transform themselves into beings of pure consciousness that could exist in the quantum realm. As the boarding party explored deeper into the ship, they found evidence that the transformation had been successful. The crew's personal quarters contained devices that could maintain their consciousness in quantum space indefinitely. Their bodies were gone, but their minds continued to exist in a form that the aliens could barely comprehend. In the ship's main computer core, they discovered that the human consciousness had merged with the vessel's artificial intelligence systems. The crew had become part of the ship itself, existing as digital beings that could control every aspect of the vessel's operations. "We are not dead," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We are more alive than we have ever been." The aliens spun around in shock. The voice had been speaking in perfect Zephyrian, as if it had been listening to their conversations and learning their language. But there was no one in the room with them. The voice seemed to come from the ship itself. "Who is speaking?" Crixina demanded. "I am Dr. Kevin Walsh," the voice replied. "Or rather, I am what Dr. Kevin Walsh has become. My consciousness now exists in the quantum substrate of this vessel. I am no longer limited by the constraints of physical existence." The aliens realized that their investigation had awakened the human crew. The consciousness of the Defiance. Personnel had been dormant, waiting for someone to discover them. Now that they had been found, they were beginning to communicate with their discoverers. "You have been watching our species for many years," Walsh continued. "You have classified us as primitive because you judge advancement by physical technology. But you have failed to understand the true nature of progress." More voices began to join the conversation. The aliens heard from Captain Morrison, Commander, Brooks, and other crew members who had transformed themselves into beings of pure consciousness. Each voice was distinct, maintaining the personality and memories of the original person, while existing in a form that transcended physical limitations. "We knew you were observing us," Morrison said. "We deliberately kept our most advanced research hidden from your sensors. We needed time to develop our capabilities without interference from the Galactic Council." The aliens began to understand that they had been outmaneuvered by a species they had considered inferior. The humans had known about the galactic civilizations long before making official contact. They had been preparing for this moment while letting the galaxy believe they were primitive. "Your classification system is flawed," explained Dr. Ryan Collins, whose consciousness now existed as part of the ship's navigation system. "You measure advancement by external technology, but true progress comes from understanding the nature of consciousness itself." The boarding party realized that they were not just investigating a derelict ship. They were witnessing the birth of a new form of life that existed beyond the physical realm. The humans had achieved something that no other species in the galaxy had ever accomplished. "We are not the primitive species you thought we were," Morrison said. "We are the next stage of evolution, and we have been waiting for the galaxy to find us so we can share what we have learned." As the aliens prepared to return to their ship, they understood that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The species they had dismissed as backward had achieved a breakthrough that would change the nature of existence itself. The galaxy was about to discover that the most advanced civilization was not the one with the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons, but the one that had learned to transcend the limitations of physical existence entirely. The aliens had no idea what they had set in motion. As they continued to explore the human ship and study its technology, they were unknowingly activating systems that had been dormant for years. Every scan, every analysis, every attempt to understand, the human technology was sending signals through the ship's consciousness. Matrix deep within the quantum substrate of the Defiant, the minds of the crew began to stir. They had been existing in a state similar to deep sleep. Their consciousness spread throughout the ship's systems like a vast digital dream. But now, the presence of the aliens was waking them up. Captain Jake Morrison was the first to fully return to awareness. His consciousness had been distributed throughout the ship's command systems, and he was able to perceive everything that was happening aboard his vessel. He could see the aliens moving through the corridors, studying his crew's work and trying to understand technology that was beyond their comprehension. Morrison found the experience of existing without a physical body to be liberating rather than frightening. His mind was clearer than it had ever been when he was limited by the constraints of flesh and bone. He could think faster, process information more efficiently, and access memories with perfect clarity. "Computer, begin materialization sequence," Morrison commanded using thought alone. The ship's advanced systems responded immediately. Energy patterns began to coalesce in the bridge area, slowly taking on a human form. The aliens watched in terror. As a figure began to appear out of thin air, becoming more solid with each passing second, Morrison manifested as a translucent blue figure that looked exactly as he had in life. He was tall and confident, with the bearing of a natural leader. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and his expression was calm and professional despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Welcome aboard the USS Defiant," Morrison said in perfect Zephyrian. "I am Captain Jake Morrison, commanding officer of this vessel." The aliens backed away in shock. They had no idea how to respond to a dead human who was somehow speaking to them in their own language. Their scanners showed no life. Signs, no heat signature, no physical presence at all. Yet Morrison stood before them, as real as any living being. "You are dead," Crixina said, her voice shaking with fear. "Your ship has been drifting in space for 3 years. There are no life signs aboard this vessel." Morrison smiled. "Dead is a relative term. Science Officer Crixina. My physical body may have ceased to function, but my consciousness continues to exist. Death, as you understand it, is merely a transition to a different form of existence." The captain's calm demeanor was even more frightening to the aliens than his impossible presence. He spoke as if appearing as a ghost was the most natural thing in the world. He seemed to know things about them that he should not have been able to learn. "How do you know my name?" Crixina demanded. "I have been listening to your conversations since you boarded my ship," Morrison replied. "Your language is quite beautiful, by the way. Very musical in its structure. I have enjoyed learning it." Before the aliens could respond, another figure began to materialize beside Morrison. This one was a woman with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. She wore the uniform of a navigation officer and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had mastered technologies that defied the laws of physics. "Allow me to introduce Commander Lisa Brooks," Morrison said. "She was instrumental in developing the consciousness transfer technology that allows us to exist in our current form." Brooks nodded to the aliens politely. "Your species has been observing us for quite some time," she said. "We have been aware of your surveillance for years. We chose to let you believe we were primitive while we developed our true capabilities." More figures began to appear throughout the ship. The aliens found themselves surrounded by the ghostly forms of the entire crew. Each person looked exactly as they had in life, but they were clearly something more than human now. Dr. Kevin Walsh materialized in the medical bay, where he had spent his final days working on the consciousness transfer protocols. His appearance was that of a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He approached the aliens without fear, treating them as honored guests rather than invaders. "You must have many questions," Walsh said. "I would be happy to explain what we have become. Our transformation represents a new stage in the evolution of consciousness itself." The aliens were beginning to understand that they were not dealing with ghosts or spirits. These were fully functional human minds that had found a way to exist independently of physical bodies. The crew of the Defiant had achieved something that no other species had ever accomplished: communications. Officer Ben Rodriguez appeared on the bridge, his youthful appearance unchanged by his transition to digital existence. He had been the youngest member of the crew, but his understanding of quantum communication systems had been essential to the project's success. "We have been preparing for this moment," Rodriguez said. "We knew that eventually someone would find our ship and discover what we had achieved. We have been waiting for the opportunity to share our knowledge with the galaxy." Navigator Claire Thompson manifested near the ship's helm, her consciousness intimately connected to the vessel's navigation systems. She had been the first to successfully merge her mind with the ship's quantum computers, paving the way for the rest of the crew to follow. "The transformation was not easy," Thompson explained. "We had to overcome our fear of death and embrace a new form of existence. But the rewards have been beyond our wildest dreams. We are no longer limited by the constraints of physical matter." As more crew members appeared, the aliens realized that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had not just developed advanced technology. They had evolved beyond the need for physical bodies entirely. Chief Engineer Amy Parker materialized in the engine room, her consciousness now one with the ship's power systems. She had been working on the theoretical framework for consciousness transfer when the experiment had begun. Her success had made it possible for the entire crew to transcend their physical limitations. Our bodies were always temporary vessels, Parker explained to the confused aliens. What makes us who we are is our consciousness, our memories, our personalities. These things do not require flesh and blood to exist. The aliens found themselves in the middle of a reunion as the crew members greeted each other with joy. They had been dormant for 3 years, existing in a state of reduced awareness. Now that they were fully awake, they were eager to reconnect. With their friends and colleagues, Morrison addressed the aliens directly. You came here expecting to find a primitive derelict ship. Instead, you have discovered that humanity has achieved something that your advanced civilizations have never even imagined. We have conquered death itself. The captain's words sent chills through the alien boarding party. They had been sent to investigate what they thought was a simple salvage operation. Instead, they had stumbled upon a discovery that would change the galaxy forever. We are not the primitive species you thought we were, Morrison continued. We have been watching you as much as you have been watching us. We know about the Galactic Council, the classification system, and the way you have dismissed humanity as insignificant. The aliens realized that their entire understanding of the galaxy was about to be challenged. The humans had not just achieved technological advancement. They had evolved into something entirely new, something that existed beyond the physical realm. What do you want from us? Crixina asked. Morrison smiled. We want to share what we have learned. Consciousness is not limited to any one species. What we have achieved, others can achieve as well. We are offering you the chance to evolve beyond your current limitations. The crew of the Defiant had become something that transcended the boundaries between life and death, between physical and digital existence. They were no longer just humans. They had become the first members of a new form of life that could exist forever in the quantum realm. As the aliens prepared to return to their ship, they knew that they carried news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The species they had dismissed as primitive had achieved immortality, and they were offering to share it with the galaxy. Commander Veltar rushed back to the bridge of the stellar wind, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed. He needed to contact the Galactic Council immediately. This discovery would change everything they thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. Open a priority channel to the council chambers. He ordered his communications officer, but as the officer tried to establish the connection, something strange happened. The communication systems began to behave in ways they had never seen before. Instead of sending the signal through normal space, the message seemed to be traveling through dimensions that should not exist. Commander, the communications officer said with confusion in his voice, the signal is being routed through unknown pathways. It appears to be passing through the human ship somehow. Veltar realized that the consciousness network that Captain Morrison had described was already active. The human crew had not just achieved immortality for themselves. They had created a communication system that could connect minds across vast distances instantly. On the bridge of the Defiant, Morrison was coordinating with his crew as they integrated their consciousness with galactic communication networks. Their minds could now exist in multiple locations simultaneously, allowing them to monitor and interact with information flowing throughout the galaxy. We are not interfering with your communications, Morrison explained to the aliens. We are simply offering to make them more efficient. Our consciousness network can carry messages faster than any physical system you have ever built. The aliens watched in amazement as their communication systems were enhanced by technology they did not understand. Messages that should have taken Hours to reach the Galactic Council were being delivered in seconds. The human consciousness network had become a new layer of reality that existed alongside normal space Dr. Ryan Collins, whose consciousness now existed as part of the ship's navigation system, began to explain how their technology worked. We discovered that consciousness can exist in quantum space, where distance and time have different meanings. Our minds can travel instantly between any 2 points in the galaxy. The implications were staggering. The humans had not just achieved immortality. They had created a form of existence that could transcend the normal limitations of physics. They could be everywhere at once, knowing everything that happened in the galaxy as it occurred. This is what we have been working toward, explained Dr. Kevin Walsh. Physical bodies are temporary, but consciousness is eternal. We have found a way to preserve the essence of who we are, while gaining abilities that surpass anything achieved by conventional technology. As the aliens struggled to understand what they were witnessing, they began to receive messages from across the galaxy. Other species were detecting the consciousness network as it spread through their communication systems. The discovery of the human ship was becoming known throughout the galactic community. The Galactic Council was in emergency session within hours. Representatives from hundreds of worlds were trying to understand reports that a primitive species had somehow achieved technological transcendence. The classification system that had governed galactic society for millennia was being challenged. "This is impossible," declared High Counselor Zarthik, the leader of the Andromedan delegation. "No species can advance from Tier 7 to beyond Tier 1 without centuries of gradual development. These reports must be exaggerated, but the evidence was undeniable." The consciousness network was already beginning to integrate with the Council's own communication systems. The humans were not asking for permission to join galactic society. They were demonstrating that they had already surpassed it. Back aboard the Defiant, Morrison was addressing the alien boarding party with an offer that would change the course of galactic history. "We are not here to conquer or dominate," he said. "We are here to share what we have learned. Consciousness transcendence is not limited to humanity. Any species can achieve what we have achieved." Commander Lisa Brooks stepped forward, her translucent form shimmering with energy. "The process requires courage and a willingness to let go of old ways of thinking. Physical existence is comfortable and familiar, but it is also limiting. We offer you the chance to become something greater." The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. The offer was tempting, but it was also terrifying. To accept would mean abandoning everything they had ever known about life and death. It would mean trusting a species they had always considered primitive with their very souls. "What happens to our bodies?" asked Crixina. "They are no longer necessary," explained Dr. Walsh. "Your consciousness, your memories, your personality, everything that makes you who you are, can exist independently. Your physical form will be preserved in our quantum matrix, but you will no longer be bound by its limitations." Navigation Officer Claire Thompson demonstrated the abilities that came with consciousness transcendence. She appeared simultaneously in multiple locations throughout the ship, her consciousness existing in several places at once. She could access any computer system instantly, travel through space at the speed of thought, and perceive reality in ways that physical beings could never imagine. "We can exist anywhere in the galaxy," Thompson explained. "We can experience multiple realities simultaneously. We can share thoughts and memories with each other directly. We have become something that your science considered impossible." The aliens realized that they were being offered a chance to join what amounted to a new form of life. The humans had not just developed better technology. They had evolved into something that transcended the normal boundaries of existence. As news of the discovery spread throughout the galaxy, different species reacted in different ways. Some, like the Zephyrians, were intrigued by the possibilities. Others were terrified by the implications. The idea that consciousness could exist independently of physical form, challenged the basic assumptions that most civilizations had about life and death. The Galactic Council found itself facing a crisis. Unlike anything in its history, the classification system that had governed interspecies relations for thousands of years was suddenly meaningless. How do you classify a species that has transcended physical existence entirely? We demand that these humans present themselves before the Council, declared Councillor Morjeth of the Centaurian Empire. They cannot simply announce their presence and expect us to accept their claims without proper verification. Morrison's response came through the consciousness network, reaching every member of the Council simultaneously. "We are already present," his voice said from their own communication systems. "We exist in the quantum substrate that underlies all of your technology. We have been listening to your deliberations since the moment you began them." The Council members looked around nervously. The idea that the humans could monitor their private communications without detection was deeply unsettling. They had always believed that their advanced encryption systems were impenetrable. "We respect your privacy," Morrison continued. "We do not intrude where we are not welcome. But we want you to understand that the boundaries you have created between species, between star systems, between dimensions themselves, are artificial constructs that consciousness can transcend." Some species began to express interest in learning more about consciousness transcendence. The Altarians, who had always been philosophical in nature, were particularly intrigued by the spiritual implications of the human discovery. They sent delegations to meet with the crew of the Defiant and learn about the transcendence process. Other species, particularly those who had built their power on advanced technology, were threatened by the human revelation. The Draconian Empire, which had dominated several star systems through superior weapons and ships, suddenly found their advantages meaningless against beings who could not be physically harmed. "We reject these claims," announced Admiral Kreshtar of the Draconian Fleet. "No species can achieve such abilities without our knowledge. These humans are using some form of advanced illusion technology to deceive us." But when the Draconians attempted to capture the human ship for study, they discovered that their weapons were useless. Energy beams passed through the consciousness forms of the crew without effect. Physical projectiles simply disappeared when they encountered the ship's quantum shields. The humans were not aggressive in response to these attacks. Instead, Morrison appeared on the bridge of the Draconian flagship and calmly explained that violence was no longer necessary in a universe where consciousness could transcend physical limitations. "You fear us because you do not understand us," Morrison told the Draconian Admiral. "We are not your enemies. We are your future, if you choose to embrace it." As months passed, the consciousness network continued to grow. Some individuals from various species chose to undergo the transcendence process, joining the human crew in their quantum existence. Others remained in physical form, but accepted the network's enhancements to their communication and travel capabilities. The galaxy began to change in fundamental ways. Trade became more efficient as the consciousness network could coordinate resource distribution across vast distances instantly. Scientific research accelerated as minds could share knowledge directly. Without the limitations of language or cultural barriers, war became increasingly rare as species discovered that their conflicts were often based on misunderstandings that could be resolved through direct consciousness contact. The network did not force peace, but it made communication so clear and efficient that most disputes could be settled before they escalated to violence. The Galactic Council eventually restructured itself to accommodate the new reality. Instead of classifying species by their technology, they began to recognize different forms of existence as equally valid. Physical species, consciousness entities, and hybrid forms all had representation in the new galactic government. Captain Morrison and his crew had achieved something that no one had thought possible. They had not just advanced human technology or extended human lifespans. They had fundamentally changed what it meant to be alive in the universe. The ship that had been lost in space for 3 years had become the foundation for a new form of galactic civilization. The humans who had been dismissed as primitive had become the teachers of species that had considered themselves advanced. As the story came to an end, the consciousness network had spread throughout the galaxy, offering every species the choice to transcend their physical limitations or remain in their traditional forms. The universe had become a place where consciousness could exist in many different ways, where death was no longer final, and where the barriers between species had become largely meaningless. The crew of the Defiant had not just survived their mission, they had completed it in ways that exceeded their wildest dreams. They had given the galaxy a new understanding of what life could become, and they had proven that sometimes the most primitive species can achieve the most advanced discoveries. Aliens who had thought humans were primitive had learned that true advancement comes not from building better machines, but from understanding the infinite potential of consciousness itself.